Is there such a thing as too much luck? Is there such a thing as too much fun? Messing around, wondering how it's taken so long. I'm really so strong. It's not too much at all.
It is hot as sin in LA, so excuse my bedraggled appearance, but today we are going to talk about a phenomenon that my generation is experiencing. I've created a term for it, and I am determined to get it into the dictionary. Let's make it a movement, because I think we need words for the feeling. And so millennials are experiencing a unique phenomenon. We are the only age group to have grown up with and without the internet in our formative years. So I had an analog childhood, playing in my yard. I would, read magazines, cut paper dolls. Like, I had no temptation of screens. And my parents were also very strict. I wasn't allowed to watch PG-13 movies till I was 13, R-rated movies till I was 17. So I grew up watching like old school musicals, and in terms of television being a screen, it wasn't something my family interacted that deeply with. And so my cognitive development wasn't tethered to technology. I think I was about 10 or 11 when a computer showed up in our house. And even then, if you remember the early days of computers, we had to wait patiently every single time for the dial-up to connect to the internet. And the internet was brand new, which meant there wasn't much of it. It was being built in real time, and we were witnessing new advancements every day. I don't even think I really understood that at the time, but we did not have all the information at our fingertips like we do today. Google was being built. You couldn't just search everything. We were laying it down brick by brick, much like a Lego sculpture. And so I remember burning CDs, ripping songs off LimeWire, printing driving directions off MapQuest, didn't have it on our phones. I stared into the abyss trying to solve that crazy computer game Myst, and the clunkiness and the friction mattered far more than we knew. Because millennials, by the numbers, this is not my take, we are the most intelligent generation to exist, which also doesn't say much. It's a little bit concerning. But there's a thing called the Flynn Effect, and it was coined by James Flynn in 1984. And he found that the average IQ scores had climbed with every single successive generation. So after a century of upward IQ, Gen Z is the first generation to show a decline. So intelligence has peaked with millennials. And Gen Z is also the first generation to be digital native. They grew up with computers, robust internet, iPads, smartphones, and the schools adapted by folding technology into their curriculum, which changed how students absorbed information. So unfortunately for Gen Z, screens tend to lead towards cognitive outsourcing. They didn't need to scour textbooks, magazines, archives to find the answer. They can Google it with ease. And that lack of effort versus physical effort codes differently in our brains. We are less likely to retain the information, and it has induced shorter attention spans. They aren't reading books, and they rely very heavily on AI for every small request. And reading surprisingly matters a lot. There's a PhD in neuroscience, Juliette Hahn, and she lays out why. People who read twice a week or more have a reduced risk of cognitive decline because it strengthens the white matter between both hemispheres, allowing them to communicate better. So that rocks. Reading also makes you better at connecting ideas. It builds your ability to empathize, and it brings your imagination to life. You know I love reading. This makes it that much more obvious. And when you read an AI summary or you skim a headline, none of the things I mentioned before turn on. So you actually eliminate your ability to think deeper. The brain is, after all, akin to a muscle. It's a use it or lose it principle. And reading makes us think. It makes us make connections. It makes us stop. We reread things. There's a process to it that actually is very beneficial for the brain. And so the issue is that we have engineered the friction out of learning, and it's the friction that codes the information into our brains more permanently. So we know handwriting encodes more deeply than typing does. That's why they encourage you to handwrite things if you want to remember them. And I still remember standing in the library assembling like an old school bibliography, by hand. It was tiresome. It took a lot of time. It was a lot of effort. And the effort was the point, because it's what made the learning stick. Like, how many of your friends do you remember their phone number? When I grew up, before cell phones, we had a landline. So we would memorize the phone numbers. We have to look it up all the time. And now everything's so easy. We remember maybe like 3 phone numbers. And not that those are necessarily like important things to remember, but this does affect the more important things. And so the other thing I want to note is that millennials were also raised by boomer parents who came of age during the greatest upward mobility this country has ever produced. 90% of children born in the 1940s and 1950s went on to out-earn their parents. 90%. So that generation didn't just hear about the American dream, they lived it in real time in front of their kids. And many of us watched our parents' circumstances visibly improve across our own childhoods. So we absorbed the gospel as fact. Work hard, get the degree, follow the steps, and the payoff arrives. We did everything right. And somewhere around midlife, it has become clear that something is missing. There is a hollowness to this moment that we did not anticipate. And I call it millennial malaise. Millennial malaise is the collective exhaustion and disillusionment of a generation that followed the rules, worked hard, got the degrees, chased the milestones, only to find the promised payoff had evaporated, leaving burnout, financial precarity, and a quiet grief for a future that was sold to them but never delivered. And it has become clear to me that this is a generational phenomenon. It wasn't just me and my peer group feeling it. The more I was noticing these patterns across social media of a lot of people talking about this sensation after I had come up with this term. And it became clear to me that we needed to create a term to match the feeling. Because despite hitting every milestone, upward mobility isn't what it used to be. 49% of millennials have jobs that are lower in socioeconomic status than their parents. So it's like we were hiking a mountain, climbing summit after summit, and we arrived at the top only to realize there's not a ridiculous jaw-dropping view, but rather a cliff. And there's nowhere left to go, no salary increase, no ability to buy a home, cost of living is rising, and frankly, it makes you want to jump right off. There's a cognitive dissonance that happens when you realize you thought you were running towards a horizon that doesn't exist. And that is painful to realize, acknowledge, and metabolize. And the wealth gap has widened so intensely that most people are just surviving. And to Gen Z's credit, they never believed in the promised payoff. They grew up very differently. They grew up running active shooter drills in their classrooms and watching climate disasters demolish cities overnight. So they resigned to a different story. And we came of age with Obama, when hope felt tangible, when the promise of the American dream, the promise of the Constitution was maybe coming true. And so this stark reality is hitting us the hardest. And the grief is very real. We need to mourn what we thought our lives were going to look like. But I also believe we can build something so much better and more true in the wake of this. A system that works for more people. And once we relinquish what life was supposed to look like, we can start to examine what we really want. What are our real values? Who did you want to be as a kid? Before anyone told you what to want. And these are the exact questions I walk through in my workbook. If you want to check it out, you can go on my website. It's why I built it. Because I believe we can build a life and career that is actually in alignment with who we are, not just having a job we thought was going to build us a financial future. The reality is there's no finite amount of money in this world. We should be living in a post-abundance era. The issue is that the people hoarding the wealth are deeply out of alignment with themselves. And the asymmetry we're living inside of is the opportunity. If corporate stability is a relic of the past, cost of living is increasing, how do you build a purposeful and meaningful life instead? These are the questions we need to be asking. The answers we find in ourselves will usher in something different. We need to mourn what was, but I tend to believe what's coming will be better than the future we thought we wanted. I'm curious to what you guys think. As always, please let me know. So much gratitude for all of you, and I will talk to you all next week.
Thank you so much for listening. If you do like listening, it would mean the world to us if you could subscribe or review the podcast anywhere that you watch or listen to the podcast. It really helps with the algorithm to share this with the world. I want to give a special thank you to young Spielberg and Sarah Yarkin for their beautiful work on our opening jingle, Dana Boulos for her help with the beautiful art, and to all of you for tuning in and keeping this dream alive. If you want to hear certain topics or from certain guests, please feel free to email us. We really, really want to hear from you and see how we can best support you. See you next time.